Hey, and welcome to the Investor Mastermind Podcast. My name is Signe Lonholdt.
And I'm Marki.
So today we wanted to talk a little bit about the name behind Investor Mastermind Podcast, because the reason we chose the word mastermind is really because of the power of a mastermind, the collective minds, you, me, Warren Buffett, our investing gurus and mentors, all the listeners of this show, Michelle and me together, we can achieve great things together. And that's the thought behind mastermind, the powerful collective mind. And that's what we found super inspirational when we, was brainstorming on names. And we did go through quite a few names before we settled on this one. So Michelle, I also know that you had a few thoughts around our name here. Maybe you want to share that.
Yeah. And when we think about mastermind, you could think of it as a group of people who are coming together, like you were saying, and by sharing our thoughts together, we can help each other become better investors. So I felt that that was a beautiful name, and it captures what we're striving toward, in that when we follow some of the best investors of all time, like Warren Buffett, Charlie Munger, and also some of their descendants, like Phil Town and Danielle Town, have said before that we can think of Warren Buffett and Charlie as like our uncles. And if we think of them as that, or maybe great uncles for us, since we're millennials, we take their lessons and try to apply that in our own life. So I really love the idea that by being part of this style of investing, it's a community, and it's really a lifestyle and a way of thinking that it might not be like the obvious choice. Like we might originally start out being influenced to believe that investing is a certain way, because if you're only given a certain menu of, say, mutual funds, you might think that this is the only way to invest. But if you are expanding your mind, you might come across more opportunities to invest in ways that you had never dreamed about before. So I just felt that this was super inspirational, that we learn from these really great investors too. And what do you think about some of the investors that we're following?
Yeah, exactly. No, I totally agree on what you're saying here. Also, by following that, we can actually learn different investing disciplines and get smarter, and that's definitely something that I also hope to achieve with the podcast. Is not only sharing with people about what I have learned so far, but also learning new things for sure. And that's actually also one of the core principles of the mastermind principles. So yeah, thank you for bringing that forward. So yeah, for me, I can, definitely Warren Buffett and his business partner Charlie Munger is definitely big role models for me in investing. Before them, it was Benjamin Graham. But to me, what Warren Buffett has described is probably a little bit more relatable. There's Phil Town, Danielle Town, Guy Spier, Mohnish Pabrai is one of the brilliant investors as well, and Philip Fisher. So yeah, some of these great investors that's actually describe their methods and that we can follow, on a daily basis. Actually, follow whatever they're sharing, as you also mentioned earlier, to make sure to get updated on everything they're sharing. There's Howard Marks as well, that is very inspirational. The Investors Podcast, which is another podcast show where, for example, William Green interviews some of the best investors that is, currently alive. Is just one of the best shows really out there as well. how about, do you have anything, we were talking a little bit, Michelle, about our daily investing practice approach, and investing practice is something I heard from Danielle Town, and I found that principle super interesting and actually integrated into what I'm doing. It was something that we talked a little bit offline about, and maybe Michelle, you want to speak a little bit about your daily investing practice, or weekly, or what you do to stay connected to some of these investing gurus or the news and things like that.
Yeah, for sure. And thank you for sharing that. And all the investors that you mentioned are all the same ones I also follow. And the writer William Green, he does incredible work. And I believe he helped to co-write some of Guy Spier's book, The Education of a Value Investor. So it's definitely great to go to some source materials on all of these really awesome investors, like any books written about Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger. I try to read those and catch up on some of those. Like, there are so many incredible books about these incredible investors. So there's way more than I can name right now. But if you start reading any of them, it starts giving you a flavor of what these investors are all about. And also, say, if I check out the news every now and then on Wall Street Journal or on Barron's or something, there might be something that Warren Buffett is up to. Like earlier this year, he was buying a lot of oil and gas companies. So if I learn about that, I might consider, is oil and gas part of my circle of competence or my ability to understand this kind of area? And I can make a decision as to whether I might want to follow Warren Buffett into similar companies in the oil and gas field, or if I might decide maybe I don't understand this enough and I don't want to go there and just focus on the companies that I feel more comfortable about. Like, for example, Charlie Munger loves Costco, and I really love Costco too. So in learning more about Costco, I might decide, like, let me check out their annual and quarterly reports. So I might read up on those a little bit more, or keep touch with some of the news of what Costco might be up to and how this economy could be affecting the business performance of Costco, as just an example. Like, none of this is investing advice, but it's just an idea of what I might go through in my everyday, just kind of keeping tabs on what these investors are up to. And when they have 13 filings that come out, usually anytime up to 45 days after the end of a quarter, then we can know what some of these really great investors who have at least $100 million of assets under management are invested in. So I'll check up on all those same investors that you talked about, like Guy Spier, Mohnish Pabrai, and Phil Town, and of course, Buffett and Munger. And Charlie Munger represents the Daily Journal Corporation, or at least used to. I know he's retired from his chairman position, but a lot of us still associate Daily Journal with Charlie Munger. So based on what some of their investments are, I can trust that these investors have done their homework and researched these companies before they've invested. And in the case of Berkshire Hathaway, maybe Buffett hasn't necessarily invested in some of these companies. Like, maybe he didn't originally invest in Activision Blizzard, and he sometimes is a little bit unhappy with the media when they say that Buffett invested in XYZ company. But in the case of Activision Blizzard, he actually came out and said, yes, I was the one who invested in this company. So if he comes out and says that, maybe I might look at that company too and see, do I understand the video gaming industry? And so based on some of what these investors are doing, I'll listen to them across podcasts or written works, or if they have webinars that are available on YouTube, and all kinds of things like that they might also put out there, like newsletters that you can sign up to some of their email newsletters. That's how we get in the know of what some of these investors are up to, and giving us some hints or ideas of companies we might want to look into and study and see if maybe we might want to invest in them someday. So that's a little bit of a flavor of how I invest. And I take it pretty casually. Like, I don't have a set regimen of how I do my investing practice. I kind of just, if I come across certain works, like whether it's written or audio visual, I'll just listen to it when I get a chance. But since it's a very passionate hobby of mine, I usually dedicate a good amount of hours. Like I might spend between 10 to 20 hours a week on investing practices. So how about you? How do you usually go about your investing practice?
So before I dive into that, Michelle, I just wanted to say that Berkshire Hathaway, that's Warren Buffett's company where Charlie Munger is chairman, and we'll dig much deeper into Berkshire Hathaway later in this podcast. It plays a big role in our investing. But for my practice, I'm pretty very, very busy with my career. My family takes a lot of time, thankfully. So my investing practice usually takes place in the evening and on weekends. Usually I have one specific topic that I immerse myself in for a while, where I read or listen to books and articles on that topic. And in the very, very beginning, when I first started to learn about investing through Phil Town and Danielle Town's book, Invested, I just scheduled in my phone calendar just once a week to just dive into one of the topics from the book. And I think that's a great way to get started, especially if you're very busy. Just schedule an hour and study each chapter of the book more in detail, read some other articles or books around that topic that's described in that book. But right now, today, I usually have a topic I immerse myself in for a month, where I read or listen to podcasts or something like that around that topics. I don't follow the news very much. I'm educated journalist, so maybe that's a little bit strange that I'm not reading all the news, but there's so much noise out there, so much information, and it's too much. So what I do, I receive the headlines from a business newspaper on email every day. On social media, I follow, for example, Bloomberg and Yahoo Finance to just get the headlines from them. But the most important thing, and you also mentioned that, Michelle, is newsletters. So I've handpicked a few newsletters that I subscribe to. One of my favorite newsletters is from Spier. Just very in-depth information in those newsletters. There's Howard Marks, who sends out his memos. Someone who's not a value investor, but big on valuating companies or trying to figure out what companies are worth, is Asvat Damodaran. And I receive his newsletter as well, where he sometimes have companies that he comments on, how come the stock of that business is going up or down, and have a commentary on that. And I find that very, very interesting. And there are other newsletters out there for sure, but these are some of the ones that I describe to, and I really make sure to handpick to get the best minds into my my inbox. I read Warren Buffett or Berkshire Hathaway, the company he owns, his annual letters that are, you also mentioned those, Michelle, and they are really brilliant. So I recommend reading those. And the thing about those newsletters is that, especially for beginners, they can be really, really difficult to understand, and you have to read them multiple times to understand all the details. And that's where you can also use us. We've read them, and we might use some other language than they do. They're a little bit older and use other kinds of language. So you can use us as interpreters of what they're saying. But what else? I read annual reports from companies. So actually about that, reading annual reports, where do you find annual reports that you want to read, or businesses that you want to follow? You mentioned a little bit whatever Buffett or Munger said, but is there anything else that you you want to share about, how to, an annual report is something a business produces once a year that really tells us about the business. What do you do to find great businesses where you actually want to read their annual reports?
Well, some of how I've figured out to think about businesses that I really want to learn more about, or that I just like. I learned that technique from Phil Town and Danielle Town, and what they call the 3 circles exercise. And it's an area where you basically go through the things that you understand, that you might work in, or that you like, or that you feel like you have a competence in, that you feel knowledgeable about. So earlier, when I was mentioning some of the companies that maybe I'm able to understand or not understand when it comes to either oil and gas or video game industries, am I naturally inclined toward those industries? Like, that's a question of if I'm inherently gravitating to those areas. And then if I am, like, let's say I feel that I'm comfortable in understanding Activision Blizzard, I will visit their website to their investor relations page and download some of their annual and quarterly reports, and then go through some of that. And also, especially, be on the lookout for the annual or quarterly letters that, like, some folks like Warren Buffett writes his annual letters, or it also used to be Jeff Bezos of Amazon, and now his new CEO, Andy Jassy, writes the annual letters. Or in the case of Netflix, they have quarterly letters. So those are also cool to look into, in addition to what the remaining quarterly and annual reports say. And a lot of those you can just get on the investor relations pages of all of these companies. And you can also source some additional information from the Securities Exchange Commission, or SEC's website. They have a search called Edgar, where you can search the company's filing. So if you're interested in some companies, that's how you can generally learn more about them. And so those are some ways that I'll look more into what these investors have talked about, or also the management. And I just also wanted to mention, there's a really great writer investor named Laura Rittenhouse that especially emphasizes what managements or CEOs write in their letters. So you can learn a lot.
Love her.
Yeah, she's amazing. And you can learn a lot about the quality of businesses just on reading what the CEO is telling you. And if you believe what the CEO is saying, like, you can try to measure their sense of candor, or how straightforward and honest they're being. Or if you feel like you don't know if the promises they're making are really going to necessarily pan out, and you could see in the following year's letters, did this come to pass? Like, something that the CEO might have promised, did it happen, or did they kind of sweep it under the rug if nothing really worked out great? So you could try to see over time how a company is doing based on a lot of the rich information in the CEO letters, and also what's in the rest of the company reports.
Yeah, and this is also something that we plan on diving much deeper into later on. What Michelle talked about here, she mentions like circle of competence, knowing what you're investing in, and Laura Rittenhouse. And over time, we'll dive much deeper into these topics. We just simply wanted to give you a little bit of insight into how we find companies, what are our daily practice or weekly practice in order to actually learn about investing. And of course, we hope that you also want to follow this podcast to actually continue to learn more about what we're doing here, and follow along on our journey. For me, I usually use screeners. Again, I have a great understanding of which type of companies I know and which type of companies I don't know. And if there's something in the annual report that I don't understand, like you mentioned with, if there's any type of message that's not super clear, if management are not super clear, I put it in my, I don't understand this. I understand as much as I don't understand it. So I just put that annual report away, and maybe if they change management, maybe I'll, check it out again. But that's going to be one of those things where, okay, I don't understand what they're writing here, and I see myself as a pretty smart person. So if they don't communicate clearly, that's just a signal to me that, nope, I don't understand this. So I'm just going to not read more from this business, and instead of focus on actually an annual report that's easy to read, from also a business segment that I understand and know something about from me as being a professional. Yeah, I've worked in different sectors, so there's different things that I feel I know something about. So yeah, I think we're almost getting towards the end of the show today. Michelle, do you have anything that you want to just share before we say thank you and goodbye?
Yes. One last thing, I wanted to just piggyback on what you said about if it's a little bit harder to understand what the CEO may have written about, maybe we can also check out some of the earnings call transcripts or webinars and presentations that companies usually release. So sometimes, like, it could be really heavy information in the official quarterly and annual reports, and sometimes the presentations might reveal some insights of maybe making it a little bit more clear, especially if some Wall Street analysts are asking the CEO some questions. Maybe they might explain it a little bit better, because the whole job of people in Wall Street is to really look at what are being put out by the company, and if they've had a chance to read the report, they might ask about maybe some information that may be a little bit hard to understand at first, and maybe we might get some insights that way. So yeah, I think that was a great point of, all of us are just trying to figure it out, and we might not necessarily get it right away either. And depending on, how willing the management is willing to be open and honest, you have to decide that for yourself as to, do you think you can believe what they're saying and what they're proposing they're doing? So I thought that was a great point, Signe, and
Yeah.
thank you so much for that. And I think this was a wonderful, discussion that we had about our investing practices. And, I think that we continue to make each other better by sharing what we do. And we also hope that it will help you out there in the audience as to getting some insights of the kinds of ways that we might invest and go about, like, looking into companies and investors. And so with that, thank you everyone for listening in, and we'll see you again on Tuesdays. Till next time.
If you enjoyed the show and found the content informational, we would be super grateful if you would leave us a review and follow us wherever you get your podcasts, so you automatically get new episodes in your feed. We publish a new show every Tuesday.
The contents of the Investing Mastermind podcast are for educational, informational, and entertainment purposes only. None of this is investing advice, and if you need help in your personal situation, please consult with a professional.